Is there a new type of passport? There's been talk about vaccine passports being rolled out. What is it and why does it matter?
Completely unacceptable.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said vaccine passports are unacceptable. He's even gone as far as to plan executive action against them. And a former Clinton advisor says if these become mandatory, it will put an end to human liberty in the West. And the majority of family units crossing the border are now being released into the United States. This comes as hundreds of migrant teens are finding refuge at a San Diego convention center as they look for a better life. Tune into Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Let's kick off with some updates on the southern border. The Biden administration has moved away from sending families back across the border using the health emergency measure called Title 42. A Texas Democrat lawmaker told CBS News Sunday that families with children under 13 years old are being allowed in. He says, quote, the family units are being released into the United States. That's where the burden of the border communities are felt. The cities, the counties, the NGOs, we are feeling the brunt of what's happening with the family units. Every night, the recently opened shelter at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church in Mission, Texas, fills up with up to 200 migrants. The shelter feeds the migrants and offers them essential items and a bed for the night or longer. A Border Patrol official said 86% of family units apprehended last Thursday were released into the United States. HHS is taking unaccompanied minors, and most single adults are still being expelled. According to Fox News, San Diego public school teachers are giving migrant children in-person instruction before their own students. One mother in the district told Fox, quote, we agree that every child deserves an in-person education, but why are tax-paying students put last? A spokeswoman confirmed to Fox the district told teachers they could volunteer to teach migrant children this week during spring break. She said she doesn't know if they are getting paid to do it, and that's up to the county. The district expects to move to in-person instruction in about a couple weeks. Speaking of San Diego, a convention center there is now housing minors. The first 500 arrived on Saturday. San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria says the center is only taking in girls aged 13 to 17. They provide not only bed and food, but also care services. He said the shelter can accommodate nearly 1,500 minors. The girls are coming from Texas. They all recently arrived in the U.S. as part of the surge of immigration at the southern border. Right now, parents aren't allowed to enter the U.S., but children may. At the border, the families decide whether to split up. Congressman Scott Peters says the parents want a better life for their kids. Officials say that 90% of the children have relatives in the U.S., and they'll spend about a month in the shelter. Now let's turn to the latest issue causing controversy, vaccine passports. What is it and why does it matter? Advocates say it'll be a fast-track way to show if people are low risk. This is especially important for travel and other industries relying on large gatherings. But is it going to be mandatory? 2 cruise lines have already made it mandatory for both their crews and passengers to have gotten the vaccine. Those are the Royal Caribbean and Virgin Voyages. But amid pushback online, the Royal Caribbean took pains to point out it's not a fleet-wide company policy. Right now, it is for 5 summer cruise programs that come with a vaccine mandate. There are still calls online to boycott the cruise line. Now, as to land, there are also questions as to whether it will be mandated. In Europe, the European Commission presented a proposal to create a digital green certificate on March 17th. The goal is to allow safe, free movement of citizens within the EU. European lawmakers recently signaled their approval for the rollout, hoping to speed up approval by summer. But they warn it won't work unless the vaccination process is sped up. The EU has fallen behind the U.S. in terms of vaccinations, and it's feeling the pressure. And Bloomberg Business Week also touched on the issue, noting governments such as Beijing and Brussels are looking at vaccine passports as a way to open up international travel again. Some countries have already implemented it. Israel set one up in February to grant people access to gyms and hotels. Iceland now uses a passport to allow foreign travel, and Saudi Arabia has an app-based passport for people who are inoculated. As for the U.S., the Biden administration is not creating a virus vaccine passport, but its officials are working with private companies. The administration is helping these companies set guidelines for the passport systems. Those systems can be used for people to show proof when they've been vaccinated. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told reporters on Monday there is currently an intra-agency process that is looking at many of the questions around vaccine verification, and that issue will touch many agencies, as verification is an issue that will potentially touch many areas of society. That's guidance we'll provide. A determination or development of vaccine passport, or whatever you want to call it, will be driven by the private sector. Ours will more be focused on guidelines that can be used as a basis, and there are a couple of key principles that we are working from. In other words, that means there will be no federal-level universal government-owned vaccine passport system, but officials will work with the private sector on guidelines. Encouragement of an open marketplace with both companies and nonprofits developing technology, and there will be an effort by the government to ensure all passports meet key standards, such as accessibility and affordability. Now, let's turn to the state level. New York was the first to roll out a vaccine passport program. They call it the Excelsior Pass. The state rolled it out on March 26th in partnership with IBM. In New York, you have to either test negative or get vaccinated to go to wedding receptions and other venues. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said in a statement, quote, "As more New Yorkers get vaccinated each day, and as key public health metrics continue to regularly reach their lowest rates in months, the first in the nation Excelsior Pass heralds the next step in our thoughtful, science-based reopening." He went on to say New Yorkers have proven they can follow public health guidance to beat back COVID, and the innovative Excelsior Pass is another tool in our new toolbox to fight the virus, while allowing more sectors of the economy to reopen safely and keeping personal information secure. Some are noting the language, saying the words, quote, "they can follow public health guidance," suggests a training in obedience. The pass will be valid for 30 days, and then a new pass is needed. So what information does it contain? The pass will show a person's name, birth date, pass type, and pass expiration date. Places to use them for upcoming events include Madison Square Garden, the Times Union Center, and the City University of New York. Sports fans in New York have already tested the pass. Now, Florida is going the opposite route of New York. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis calls vaccine passports unacceptable. He announced he'll take executive action against vaccine passports. Governor Ron DeSantis is planning emergency executive action against the push to require vaccine passports for Americans to travel around the country or the world. He says it is completely unacceptable for either the government or the private sector to impose upon you the requirement that you show proof of vaccine to just simply be able to participate in normal society. He also made it clear in early March he wouldn't stand for them, saying at the time, "We are not supportive of that. I think it is something that people have certain freedoms and individual liberties to make decisions for themselves." And now some are raising concerns, asking what happens if you don't want to get the vaccine. Others point to ethical, religious, and other points of view. Right now, there seems to be more questions than answers. Critics have noted vaccine passports could make inequality worse. Sarah Chan of the University of Edinburgh told The Nation Speaks, "People in low, middle-income countries are already disadvantaged with respect to healthcare. Generally, they are further disadvantaged with respect to COVID because they have less access to vaccinations. So are we saying we should compound that and make it worse by imposing even further restrictions on their freedom of movement?" She went on to say, if we start deciding who is allowed to freely participate in society based on individual vaccination status, we are really trying to put the responsibility onto individuals to be vaccinated. And that, in turn, assumes that whether or not a person has been vaccinated is wholly a matter of their own completely free choice. And that is just not the case. In fact, vaccination is going to be dependent on a whole load of other factors beyond people's control, such as ability to access the vaccine, pre-existing health conditions, and so forth. Others are noting vaccine passports could undermine privacy. A top advisor to Biden, Andy Slavitt, said Monday, "Unlike other parts of the world, the government here is not viewing its role as the place to create a passport, nor the place to hold the data of citizens. We view this as something the private sector is doing and will do. What's important to us are that some important criteria be met with these credentials. He went on to say privacy of the information, security, and a marketplace of solutions are all things that are part of what we believe in, as is the ability for people to be able to access this free and in multiple languages. He says part of that criteria is making sure people have access to the digital vaccine passport and that their privacy is protected, but he didn't go into what businesses could require of them. And Bill Clinton's former re-election campaign advisor, Naomi Wolf, said mandatory vaccine passports would be the end of human liberty in the West. She told Fox News, vaccine passport sounds like a fine thing if you don't understand what those platforms can do. I'm the CEO of a tech company. I understand what this platform does. It is not about the vaccine. It's not about the virus. It's about your data. Once this rolls out, you don't have a choice about being part of the system. What people have to understand is that any other functionality can be loaded onto that platform with no problem at all. She went on to say it is absolutely so much more than a vaccine pass. It is, I cannot stress enough, it has the power to turn off your life or to turn on your life, to let you engage in society or be marginalized. She says it has the potential to be linked to your PayPal account and digital currency and create a second class of citizens. Wolf noted it happened in Israel, and months later it became apparent that activists were shunned and constantly kept under surveillance. She also likened it to the CCP's social credit system. Under that system, those who earn the highest credit scores enjoy greater access to training and employment benefits, while those with low scores encounter restrictions even in day-to-day life. It was first launched around February 2019. The social credit rating app called Unaccompanied was formally released in February of 2019 by a team under the dual leadership of the Communist Youth League Central Committee and the National Development and Reform Commission. So what information does it gather about its users? They include anti-social behavior and participation in volunteer work, educational background, and online shopping habits. For instance, when a student purchases an online course via the app, it will determine how much of a discount can be applied based on his or her social credit score. And more importantly, when looking for employment, those who have higher social credit will be prioritized. Others point out there are several kinds of COVID-19 vaccines from the US, China, Europe, and question what would happen if different countries didn't recognize the vaccine one did take. And others point out that vaccine passports could simply just not work, with different strains of the virus coming out and different vaccines having different efficacy rates. In other words, there are still a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.